Today is the end of our 7-week fall series. This is it. Week 7, we've been working with this little book up here called Resilient by Rick Hansen, How to Grow an Unshakable Core of Calm, Strength, and Happiness, which is a timely topic these days. Our topic on the Sunday before Thanksgiving is generosity, which I see as being closely related to gratitude, isn't it? Generosity and gratitude somehow seem to go hand in hand. And the kind of generosity we're talking about today goes beyond money and material things and stuff. This is generosity as a mental resource, or as we might say in Unity, a state of consciousness, right? Here's how they describe it in the book. At first glance, generosity may not seem like a mental resource, but it strengthens you with a sense of the fullness that's already inside you, while also connecting you with other people. Generosity to them is a gift to you along the way, giving you even more to offer in a positive cycle. That's what it is about building that cycle. They want us to expand our definition of generosity, because if we expand our definition of generosity, we're going to end up with more opportunities to practice being generous. And as a starting point, they define generosity as being grounded in altruism. Altruism, that's the idea that we provide a benefit to others without expecting anything in return. And in some instances, providing that benefit can involve some kind of a sacrifice or detriment on the part of the giver. That can be a part of it. And I think the most common and extreme example that we think of is on the battlefield, the soldier who falls on a grenade in order to save others. But really, any act of giving where we don't expect anything in return qualifies as altruism. A synonym for altruism is selflessness. And altruism is a quality that seems to be uniquely human. It seems to have uniquely evolved in human beings, which I think is probably due to the way that we band together in social units in order to live. So for us, social creatures that we are, the survival of the group increases the chances of the individual surviving, right? The survival of the group aids the survival of the individual, and vice versa. So we have evolved basically to look out for each other. So in order to cultivate and grow a consciousness of generosity based on altruism, one of the things they suggest in the book is to not minimize the concept, to remember and recognize that everything counts. You know, it's not just the check that we write to a charity or what we put in the tip jar or things like that. It's many other things that we may take for granted on a daily basis. So we need to stay aware of the times when we are generous by giving our attention, our patience, our help and encouragement. Sometimes our silence can be a wonderful, generous gift in a situation, right? I give you my silence in this situation. Anytime that we do something that might not be our preference in the moment, or when we stretch a bit to simply take others into account, that's generosity. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for the things that we do like that, and it all has to come back to this concept of awareness and mindfulness. That's, again, we link back to that. And here's an interesting insight from the book. They say that whenever we feel resentful or pressured when giving, that's a good sign that we weren't being mindful and aware about what we were doing. Altruism doesn't mean we have to be a doormat or an easy mark for a con artist. Those are the kind of situations where we end up feeling resentful about giving. The more awareness that we can bring to seemingly small acts of generosity, the more we do that, the safer we feel when we're giving. When we make it into a conscious process, what we're doing is we're gaining self-confidence so that we know that we will not be easily taken advantage of. We won't feel that sense of pressure or resentfulness. We'll know that it's safe to be generous. In fact, they say that having opportunities to practice generosity is really important to our overall sense of well-being. And I think this is very true, because the biggest reason that people sometimes feel a sense of emptiness or a sense of dissatisfaction with life is because they don't have an outlet for their natural gifts and talents. Just imagine that you've got some talent, something you like to do, something that you could share that would make you happy to share it with others, and you don't have the opportunity. That's hard. And I think that's one of the big reasons why, at least in my humble opinion, that a virtual online community, you've heard that term, virtual community, online community. There are people out there who are saying, oh, the internet is going to put all the churches out of business because everybody's going to get together and do it all online. I really don't think that can ever be a substitute for the real thing. Communities like this one that we call Unity of Auburn thrive because people can find a healthy balance of giving and receiving, and that has to be in person. There are all sorts of opportunities here and other similar places where we can share gifts, where we can share talents that you're just not going to find in an online community. And I defy anyone to show me how you could have a potluck Thanksgiving dinner online. Virtual pie, huh? Yeah, right. No thanks. Probably the most common form of generosity is our simple human capacity for compassion. And they define compassion as the recognition of pain with the desire to relieve it. A very simple definition. Compassion is our response to the suffering in the world, and at the very least it requires us to look and to see, to acknowledge the pain of others instead of blocking it and turning away from it, at the very least. And here's a question that they ask in the chapter on generosity. Here's the question. They say, how can we be moved by the sorrows of others without becoming flooded, drained, or burned out? There's a term for it. It's called compassion fatigue. This is a timely question as we find ourselves surrounded with all of the news about the fires, not just to the north, but to the south. They keep using these superlatives, right? The deadliest, the most destructive, the worst in California history. I mean, it's quite an avalanche of news that calls on compassion. So in order to sustain compassion without becoming drained or stressed out, here's what they recommend. They suggest that we combine compassion with equanimity. Now, equanimity doesn't mean indifference. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Equanimity means that we deal with whatever is facing us and maintain a sense of inner and outer peace. Here's how they suggest doing it. One way to get that process started. They say to bring equanimity alongside compassion, it helps to stay grounded in your body, aware of the sensations of breathing as you feel the pain of other people. Reflect on the fact that the suffering is part of a vast web of causes and effects. Not to justify or diminish it, but to see the bigger picture with acceptance and insight. It's kind of a tall order, but that's what we're called upon for. In the case of these wildfires, I think maybe the bigger picture might be difficult to see right now. It might not quite be there yet. It's not in focus yet, because whatever good results that might follow do not in any sense outweigh or even begin to balance the loss of life and destruction that we're seeing. Nobody, I hope, nobody is ever going to look back on this and say it was worth it because some greater good came of it. You will hear that out there, and I will tell you, I think it's just another form of metaphysical malpractice. And we still have to look for the good. We still have to look for the good in the long term, and in the short term, we have to be the good. A little generosity from a lot of people can do wonders. One of the things we can do is to look at all of the different creative ways of giving, of being generous in this situation. I thought about putting together a list, but there are so many of them out there. All you have to do is go to one of the local TV stations. They have resources. Put in Butte County Fires, put in Campfire. You're going to hear all sorts of ways that people can help. And the one thing that they don't want is stuff, okay? They said they are overwhelmed with clothing and blankets and things like that. They don't know what to do with it all. They're asking for donations of money primarily. Lots of places that you can give to do that. Another thing they're looking for are gift cards. The different shelters and things need the gift cards so people can get the supplies and things they need in Chico and the surrounding communities that are still there. Another thing that I saw that was kind of interesting, I don't know that I've seen that many refugees down this way, but they say if you have extra space in your home, check out something called Airbnb. You can list your space on Airbnb as a way to offer it to people that might need a space, a place to stay that haven't found it yet. So there are all those different ways of doing it. And I know some of us here know people who live in Paradise or the other communities around there who have lost everything. But again, on a personal level, closer to home, so to speak, some of you might remember this person. Remember Kathy Zavada? Kathy used to be here on many occasions as a guest musician, concerts and speakers. She's going through the Unity field licensing process to become a minister. She's been serving the Unity community in Oroville, which means she moved from Mount Shasta to Paradise. Yep, and she's lost everything right down to the piano that she traveled with. All of that is gone. So, go to her Facebook page, Kathy Zavada, Z-A-V-A-D-A, Kathy Zavada. There's a Facebook funding process that's similar to GoFundMe. You can go there and see what they're doing to help Kathy. So lots of things that we can do. If you're not a Facebook person, give us a call during the week and we can maybe help you to connect if that's something you're called to do. You know, the bigger picture in these situations is always about possibilities. And it's also about some certainties, because we can be certain that lots of people from all over are going to come together to help rebuild and maybe figure out some ways to keep this from happening again. And if we keep that idea at the forefront, that might help to give us that sense of equanimity and stave off some of that compassion fatigue that can happen in these situations. Okay, we want to move on to the next topic, is under generosity, which is forgiveness. I was surprised by this. This was something that was new to me, looking at forgiveness as a way to practice generosity. But it really makes sense. Forgiveness is a form of generosity, and it goes in both directions. I've always said forgiveness is more for the benefit of the person doing the forgiving. And if it stops there, that's okay. I want to show you a definition of forgiveness that comes from one of our teachers at Unity Institute when Karen and I were there studying. Here's what he says. He says, "It has been said, forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past." Forgiveness is about accepting a past experience and leaving it in the past. We then no longer carry it with us in the present moment. That was from Reverend Robert Brummett. You know, we've become far too accustomed to hearing the word forgiveness as meaning that we have to let someone off the hook, or that we have to condone their behavior. It doesn't mean that at all. We don't have to reconcile with the other person in order to find peace. Yes, we've all heard the heroic stories, right, about the Amish people in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, who forgave and pardoned the man who shot 10 schoolgirls in their little one-room Amish schoolhouse there, or what happened in South Africa during that wonderful truth and reconciliation process. Well, those stories show human beings who are at the very pinnacle of consciousness, I think. Nobody expects everyone to be able to work at that level, and we shouldn't feel guilty if we don't, or if we find that difficult. But at the very least, we need to get rid of any sense of needing to hold on to something and use it as a way to spark what really amounts to vengeance. We need to let that vengeance consciousness go. We can still require accountability without requiring a pound of flesh, so to speak. And there's an observation that I like by someone I consider to be an expert on the topic of forgiveness. His name is Professor Fred Luskin. He's a psychologist who specializes in that, and this is what he says. He says, "Remember that a life well lived is your best revenge. Instead of focusing on your wounded feelings and thereby giving the person who caused you pain power over you, learn to look for the love, beauty, and kindness around you, and don't forget in you. Forgiveness is about personal power." One final practice here before we leave this topic. One final practice in expanding our definition of generosity is to take notice of the times that we engage in the practice of sorting people into two groups. Us and them. Us and them. As I mentioned earlier, altruism is not necessarily something that comes naturally. We've evolved into it. So our natural tendency towards tribalism is still embedded in the brain. It's embedded in the brain because it's linked to powerful human drives and emotions that can make it difficult to unembed or counteract that stuff. So we go on dividing people into these separate circles labeled us and them. You all know the story of Thanksgiving that every child in school learns about, right? The one where the European immigrants and the Native Americans joined together for a harvest festival. That's a true story. On at least that one occasion, they were able to overcome that us and them mentality and join into one big circle labeled we. It really happened. Today, I think probably we're getting kind of back to what we see in this picture up here. Woman comes in and says, "What are you doing?" Husband says, "Getting ready for Thanksgiving." He's busy writing up signs. One says, "No politics." The other says, "Dinner table is neutral zone." And then separate places for Republicans and Democrats to go with arrows pointing in opposite directions, right? That's kind of the way it feels. So it's too bad they couldn't keep that going from back at the time of the first Thanksgiving, because we need it. We need it. This is how they talk about the situation in the book, how important it is. They say, "For humanity as a whole, us against them worked in the Stone Age. But with billions of people now living interdependently together, hurting them is hurting us. Expanding your circle of us is not just generous for others, it's good for you as well." Maybe instead of thinking about it in terms of tribes and circles, maybe it's better to think of it as one very large Thanksgiving table. I think Thanksgiving can be a reminder that we know better, because we've done it before. We've transcended the primitive tribalism, and we can keep doing it if we really want to. You know, there's some real generosity that's expressed in the process of inviting others to join us at the table in order to honor what we have in common. And that's always going to be far greater and far more significance than what usually turn out to be very superficial differences. So with that in mind, I am going to let a singer-songwriter by the name of David Roth have the last word with what I think is probably the perfect Thanksgiving song. Before we do that, please note there's no discussion group today after the service because we're going to have our potluck right away. But we'll be meeting next Sunday after the talk to sort of wrap things up and go over any questions.
take our places at the table, a moment to remember and reflect upon our wealth. Here's to loving friends and family, here's to being able to gather here together in good company and health. And may we be released from all those feelings that would harm us. May we have the will to give them up and get them gone. For heavy are the satchels full of anger and false promise. May we have the strength to put them down. May the light of love be shining deep within your spirit. May the torch of mercy clear the path and show the way. May the horn of plenty sound so everyone can hear it. May the light of love be with you every day. And may we wish the best for everyone that we encounter. May we swallow pride and may we do away with fear. For it's only what we do not know that we have grown afraid of, and only what we do not choose to hear. May the light of love be shining deep within your spirit. May the torch of mercy clear the path and show the way. May the horn of plenty sound so everyone can hear it. May the light of love be with you every day. And as we bless our daily bread and drink our day's libation, may we be reminded of the lost and wayward soul, the hungry and the homeless that we have in every nation. May we fill each empty cup and bowl. May nothing ever come between or threaten to divide us. May we never take for granted all the gifts that we receive, being ever mindful of the unseen hands that guide us and the miracles that cause us to believe. May the light of love be shining deep within your spirit. May the torch of mercy clear the path and show the way. May the horn of plenty sound so everyone can hear it. May the light of love be with you every day. May the horn of plenty sound so everyone can hear it. May the light of love be with you. May the light of love be with you. May the light of love be with you every day.
What do you think? That's a pretty good song. In fact, I don't know if you remember this. Back in 1999, David Roth was the guest musician at Fox Valley Unity in Batavia, Illinois, where Karen and I first met. And he did this song on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. It was wonderful to see him do that live.